She woke to her own name, whispered from the closet. The voice matched her dead mother's. The closet door was open 2 inches. Mara Ellison did not believe in ghosts. She believed in patterns. Patterns warned before things broke. She sat up, heart thudding, and whispered, "I hear you," as if naming fear could leash it. Winter light lay gray on the floor. In her chest, grief and anger braided like wire. By noon, a message arrived. An envelope with no stamp slid under her door. Inside lay a Polaroid of Mara at 10, laughing at a ring toss. Her mother stood behind her, hand on her shoulder. On the back, in blunt letters, "You still make the same mistakes." Mara worked hospital intake, the one who asked hard questions while families clutched their coats. She knew the flavors of lying, slippery, stubborn, panicked. When she stared at the Polaroid, she didn't think of ghosts. She thought of leverage. Someone wanted her attention. Someone knew her history too well. She locked the door, drew the chain, and called her neighbor across the hall, Mr. Calder, a retired math teacher who fed pigeons and monitored drama. "Did you see anyone at my door?" she asked. "Just now?" "No. Morning delivery kid came through." "Thanks," she said, and hung up before he could ask if she was okay. On the coffee table, her spiral notebook lay open where she tracked personal triggers as a scientist. Phrases, smells, rapid exits. A therapist once said her vigilance was a trauma costume. Mara said it was a tool belt. She wrote a new line. Unstamped envelope. Childhood Polaroid. Message. You still make the same mistakes. Investigate sender. In the afternoon, she rode the train to the west side where the fairgrounds had been before the developer turned them into condos. She walked the perimeter and tried to imagine the past through glass. Her mother used to say, "We are made of stories we didn't consent to." Then she'd laugh and buy cotton candy. When Mara was 16, her mother was found in a motel. Official cause, suicide. Unofficial cause, a man who emptied her accounts and told her she was lucky to be loved. Mara swore never to audition for such love again. But the same kinds of people found her anyway. Men with cool hands and detailed rules. Bosses who praised her competence and buried her under everyone else's emergencies. She knew the psychology of evil didn't look like a mask. It looked like help. At sunset, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. Do you remember his eyes? She did. The man had eyes the color of weak tea and a patience that frightened her more than rage. She texted back, "Who are you?" That night, she set a chair against the closet door, then felt silly and moved it away. She boiled water for tea and set a rule. No chasing shadows after midnight. She failed by 12:15, scrolling public records on her cracked laptop. She ran surnames she remembered from her mother's old address book, cross-referencing court cases, pawn shop receipts, old divorce filings. It felt like picking a lock inside her own head. At 2, she found him. Vincent Holla, fraud. 2 counties. A parole condition requiring residency checks. A recent photo showed a man who had been handsome, the edges sanded by time. The eyes were still weak tea. Mara's mouth went dry. She copied the address into her notebook, then shut the laptop and sat in the dark until the radiator ticked her back into her body. Her therapist had assigned a grounding exercise. Name 5 things you can see, 4 you can touch, 3 you can hear, 2 you can smell, 1 truth you can live with. Mara named them: lamp, notebook, mug, radiator, window. Blanket, sleeve, couch seam, her own hair. The hum outside, a siren, the fridge's throat. Tea, dust. I am still here. Morning brought a second envelope. Another Polaroid, this time from a different angle, a stranger's angle. 10-year-old Mara reached for the ring toss. Her mother watched. On the back, there's a pattern you refuse to see. She called in sick for the first time in 8 months. Holding the photo to the light, she saw a booth sign in the background. Guess your weight. Win a prize. Next to it was a shadow like a person turning away. Mara took the bus to the public library, where old newspapers lived like ghosts on microfilm. The smell of paper rot and dust made her shoulders drop. At the reference desk, she asked for the year the photo would have been taken. The librarian rolled the machine to a table and smiled as if she trusted Mara to handle delicate things. Hours passed. Frames clicked. A local feature surfaced. Summer Jubilee lights up county. A photo gallery of kids and tired parents. There, half-cropped but clear, were Mara and her mother. And behind them, a man at the edge of the frame. Vincent Hall. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at them. Mara printed the page and tucked it into her bag. Adrenaline turned metallic in her mouth. If Vincent had been there, if he had known them then, her mother's end was not an accident of loneliness. It was a long game. A text came as she stepped onto the sidewalk. He doesn't stop. He just changes bait. She typed, "Who are you?" A pause. Then, "Someone who made the same mistakes. Don't make them again." "Not this time," Mara said. She took the train to Vincent's listed address, a weathered boarding house with a cigarette machine nailed to the wall. She did not walk up steps. She watched. People came and went. A man with a dog, a woman carrying milk, a teenager counting bills. At dusk, a man with shoulders like forgotten chores stepped out. The eyes were the same. He turned left. Mara followed at a careful distance. He did not look back while she followed him, which made Mara uneasy. This one moved with plain purpose, like a man going for dish soap. The city smelled like wet concrete and old coffee. Vincent turned into a dollar store and came out with batteries and cough drops. She recognized the rhythm. A man who counts steps so the world cannot surprise him. Her therapist called it defensive routine. She called it a hunting loop. He cut across the park. Mara made herself breathe. The point was not to predict him. The point was to stop inheriting his map. She had loved the clean names, intermittent reinforcement, gaslighting, trauma bonding. Labels made fog feel navigable. Now, watching Vincent chew a cough drop, she felt the foolishness of hoping words could neutralize harm. Words were a flashlight, not a shield. He reached a church basement where a sign read, "Community Meeting, Coffee Inside." He went down. Mara followed. Metal chairs, a coffee urn, and flyers. Vincent took the edge seat. The facilitator, cardigan soft and eyes hard, introduced boundaries with repeat offenders. Mara sat in back. People spoke. A man whose sister kept borrowing, a grad student erased by her advisor, an elderly woman paying a nephew's bail. When it was Vincent's turn, he called himself Tom and said people took advantage of his kindness. He smiled in that careful way that looks like empathy and feels like cataloging. She pressed her nail into her palm and noted, "Alias Tom, claims victim status. Watch projection." She added, "If evil wants to hide, it volunteers to help. What does a boundary feel like in your body?" The facilitator asked. Eyes closed. Mara expected static. Instead, she felt heat near her throat, as if her voice had been plugged into a wall. She pictured the closet door closing. After the meeting, Vincent folded a flyer about identity theft. He looked up and saw her. For a second, his face emptied, like a stage cleared of props. Then he smiled with recognition he had not earned. "Do I know you?" he asked. "You knew my mother," she said. "Lots of people know lots of people." "You met us at a county fair," she said. "You changed the bait." He tilted his head. "Sounds like you've been reading the wrong books." "I know who you are, Vincent." His eyes flattened. She had said his name too loud. A couple by the urn glanced over. He lowered his voice. "I'm sorry for whatever you think happened. People in grief do strange arithmetic. He moved toward the stairwell. She let him pass. Chasing him would waste what she had learned. Outside, her phone buzzed. You just looked at him. Careful. He uses pity as a net. He will test your time next. Who are you? She typed. A picture arrived. A scarred palm holding a broken locket. Caption: I was 19. He promised safety. The first loan was temporary. Can we meet? Not yet. He tracks attention. Build a boundary. Then we hunt. She went home the long way, making sure no one followed. She laid the Polaroids on the table and drew a timeline. She added a column. My choices. Stop. Explaining, excusing, rehearsing his narrative. Start. Documenting, delegating, refusing silent favors. At work the next morning, the intake desk roared. Yet she felt steady. She asked a coworker to sit in. She took her breaks. Small boundaries felt like sleep after fever. At noon, Mr. Calder called. Someone was trying your door, he said. I opened mine and scared them off. Hoodie, tall, smelled like menthol. Thank you, she said. She reinforced her locks and set a motion sensor by the closet. When the building quieted, she wrote, I am not 10 anymore. I can bait 2. The unknown sender wrote. He can be pulled into daylight if you mirror his method. He wants you to rely on him for small rescues. Offer him one. Offer him a rescue repulsive and precise. Vincent expected devotion to grow from dependency like mold. If she staged a need, she could steer the terms. She made a plan. She would run into him near the boarding house with a dead car battery. Let him suggest help. Record everything. Exits open. Witnesses close. On Friday, she parked 2 blocks from his place and loosened her battery cable just enough to fail to start. She practiced a neutral face. She thought of her mother and the microfilm light. Vincent came around the corner at dusk, carrying a pizza box. She stepped out and frowned at the car. He saw her, paused, and rearranged his features into concern. Car trouble? He asked. It won't start. She said. He set the box on the hood. I can help, he said. Gentle, generous, practiced. He bent to look, invading the engine with the casual authority of a man entering a story he believed he owned. She lifted her phone, hit record, and kept her hand steady. Loose terminal, he said after a moment. Lucky thing I know my way around these. Lucky, she said. A faded prison stamp marked his wrist. He glanced up. You live near here? Close enough, she said. I'm Mara. Mara, he repeated. Tom. Sure, she said. He tightened the cable, then turned the key. The engine caught. He stepped back, pleased with his competence. It was the face she remembered from every story he told women. See? You need me. Thank you, she said. Can I repay you? Coffee? He looked at the pizza and then at her, calculating hooks. Another time, he said. But if you ever have trouble again, you know where to find me. He patted the hood, left the pizza, and scribbled a number on the identity theft flyer. He offered it like a charm. She kept her face calm while inside something old unclenched. He had given her a tether. Now she would pull. She recorded the time, the street, the faces nearby, every small variable that could later matter. Control was not safety, but it was a railing in a dark stairwell, enough to keep her moving through the night. The next morning, the number he gave her sat on her counter like a live wire. Mara didn't call. Predators test by waiting. If she chased, he could name the tempo. Control meant patience, not pursuit. She spent the day moving deliberately: coffee, laundry, small errands, so her body didn't learn that vigilance was her only fuel. Her therapist once warned, hypervigilance is grief wearing combat boots. Today she tried softer shoes. The anonymous sender did not message all morning. That silence was heavier than threat. Whoever they were, They knew Vincent's shape, the way burned scars, no flame. The absence made Mara study her own reflection in the toastochrome. Tired eyes, shoulders braced like her skeleton was negotiating hostage terms. She whispered, "I am not prey." Naming things didn't fix them, but it steadied her reach. By lunch, the message finally came. He will make a tiny ask soon. If you feel to... He owns your tone next. Listen for the bait. Mara typed, "What did he take from you?" The reply came slow. Time first. Then choices. Then friends. He needed witnesses gone before guilt looked lonely. She reread that line 3 times. A predator does not steal a life at once. He steals the scaffolding and leaves the collapse-looking self-authored. At work. A case arrived. A runaway teen brought in by a neighbor. The girl wore defiance like cracked armor, chin high but breath shallow. Mara spoke to her gently. Ask real questions, not intake template questions. The girl flinched only when asked if someone at home rewrote her apologies for her. There it was, control by vocabulary. Mara marked the chart, requested crisis consult, and when the girl's breathing steadied, Mara saw herself 10 years smaller. Frantic dignity, no shelter for truth. The world never looked for bruises on the voice. After her shift, she walked home through dusk that felt uncomfortably watchful. At her building door, she saw something leaning against it, an old snow globe containing a tiny county fair, Ferris wheel and all. A note taped to the base. You always come back where you were first fed. Mara scanned the street. No footsteps, no engines idling. She took the globe upstairs and set it on the table like evidence. She shook it gently. Fake snow swarmed the Ferris wheel in a blizzard that left no survivors. She pictured her mother's laugh buried under static. Her phone buzzed. Vincent. Tom. Glad you got home safe yesterday. I still have the pizza. Want a slice later? I hate letting food go to waste. There it was, the tiny ask. Not food proximity. He framed it as kindness, framed himself as rescuer adjacent. She stared at the text until her pulse slowed. Then she typed deliberately, busy tonight. Another time, she almost hit send. Then she deleted busy. Lies give men a map. She wrote instead, no thank you. No room for negotiation. No apology. Boundary as blade. 3 dots blinked. Stopped. Blink again. Stop. She set the phone down. He would test escalation next. Curiosity, guilt, or insult. Predators shapeshift until one hook catches. Before midnight, a second text. You seem tense. People misread me a lot. I don't want you to feel cornered. Not threat permission, which is worse. Men like him don't offer safety. They offer a leash tied with compliments. She did not answer. Around 1:00 her motion sensor chirped. She grabbed her phone and eased to the door. The hallway camera feed from the tiny device she'd installed earlier showed only static at first, then a blur of movement low to the floor. Not a person. A cat. It pawed at her welcome mat, sniffing for food. Mara exhaled. Fear shrinks the world until coincidence feels orchestrated. She crouched by the door, stroking adrenaline until it lost its teeth. Then a human shadow crossed the far end of the hall. Not the cat. Not Mr. Calder. Broader shoulders. Unhurried gait. He didn't knock. That was the tell. Vincent didn't want entry. He wanted atmosphere. A presence becomes a story the victim finishes for him. The shadow paused, then vanished down the stairwell. The anonymous sender texted seconds later. He's checking your threshold. He wants to know if your fear will open the door for him. Mara typed. If you know his moves, you know his name. Who are you? Silence for 2 full minutes. Sender. I was his mirror. Now I'm what slipped through. Mara. You knew my mother? Sender. Not her. The pattern. Women like her. Women like us. He rehearses heartbreak until he finds the version that doesn't fight. Mara sat with that. The version that doesn't fight. She could feel 10-year-old her going still at the ring toss, watching adults barter for comfort, disguised as chance. The next day, Mara dialed the parole office, pretending to verify employment for a tenant. She learned 2 details. Yes, he was on conditional supervision. Yes, he listed community volunteering as restorative engagement. Clever camouflage. If she pushed him wrong, he'd pivot to victimhood and flip the system like a mattress. But conditional supervision also meant oversight. Predators hate paperwork because paper remembers. She walked to the church basement during lunch hour. The facilitator from the meeting was stacking chairs. "Tom," Mara said carefully, "does he always attend this group?" The woman hesitated. "You're asking because you feel unsafe?" "I'm asking because he's hunting," Mara said. The facilitator straightened. Not shocked, familiar. "He's charming until Boundary Day. Then someone bleeds or vanishes. You're not the first to warn me, but you're the first who came back sober with evidence in your eyes." She lowered her voice. "If you need witnesses, I'll stand." Mara nodded, throat thick. Not all rescues mean surrender. Some are scaffolding. That night, Vincent texted again. "I'm nearby. Can we chat?" No pressure. She considered answering. Instead, she screenshot the whole thread, timestamped it, emailed it to herself twice. Proof growing roots. Then she typed back, "Meet me in a public place tomorrow, noon. If your intentions are as harmless as you say, you'll show up where harm has no shadow." He replied instantly, "Of course. I'm always transparent." She read the sentence 3 times. Always transparent was the kind of lie that confessed through posture. Transparency means someone else can verify your past. He never expected verification, only belief. She sat at the window watching streetlights flicker like weak stars. Then she opened the snow globe again, flipping it upside down. White flecks swarmed and caught against the glass Ferris wheel. No one inside escaped the spin. She whispered to the memory of her mother, not a prayer, not a plea. The hook only works on silence. She would not be silent. Down the hall, a door clicked. Heavy footsteps faded. Somewhere a pipe rattled. Her own breathing sounded like a verdict she had finally signed with her full name. The air settled. Her body did not. Tomorrow would be the split where he tested ownership, and she tested daylight. And daylight is where predators rot. He chose the cafe facing plate glass windows, the kind of place where sunlight impersonates honesty. Mara arrived 3 minutes after noon so he would feel uncentered. Predators lean on control. Taking the first move steals their leash. He sat, with a paper cup he hadn't touched, posture gentle, eyes calculating. When she approached, he smiled like forgiveness wearing expensive cologne. "Glad you came," he said. "You wanted transparency. Here we are." He folded his hands. "I think you misunderstand me. I help people. If you're hurting, you don't help," she said calmly. "You harvest distress like a landlord harvesting late rent." Something flickered behind his eyes. He leaned forward. "You're tense. Trauma makes people rewrite history. You worked on people, not with them." A pause. A tiny inhale. The first mass crack. He softened his tone, almost parental. "I'm not your enemy, Mara. You were never mine. You were hers." The name her landed like a lit match in gasoline. For the first time, he didn't know which performance to choose: victim, teacher, patron, savior. His hand twitched toward the cup, but didn't touch it. "Mara," he said slowly, "your mother, you didn't love her. You stuck a straw into her loneliness until she collapsed. Then you wore her death like absolution." People at the next table shifted, half listening. Visibility, his natural enemy, grew teeth. He leaned closer, voice low. "Be careful what you accuse people of in public." That was the first threat. Good. Now the daylight had a pulse. She reached into her coat, not for a weapon, but for a folder, the old microfilm printout, the county fair photo. She placed it between them. "Patter," she said. "You weren't her accident. You were her timeline." He didn't touch the photo, because touching evidence is acknowledgement. "You don't know anything," he muttered. "I know you were there before she broke. I know your parole officer thinks you volunteered to repair harm. I know the volunteers aren't allowed to target vulnerable women alone. Which means you're already in violation," his jaw said. "No one will believe you. They never do." "Someone already does." His eyes narrowed. "Who?" She almost said your last survivor, but her phone buzzed first. Sender. "I'm here. Window. Northeast corner." She glanced up. A woman stood outside the glass, late 30s, scarred hand visible at her side. Not hiding anymore. Not prey. Vincent saw her too and flinched. Recognition detonated behind his eyes, like old guilt catching its breath. The woman lifted her sleeve, just enough to show another scar. Older, longer. His past made flesh. Vincent rose. "This is setup." "No," Mara said. "This is context." He turned to leave but froze at the door because the facilitator from the church basement now stood in the entry, pretending to browse the menu. 2 witnesses. A boundary with bones. This was how predators rot. Not from force, but from exposure. He looked back at Mara, tone stripped of softness. "You think this ends me?" "No. I think this reveals you. Ending yourself is what you always finish on your own timeline." He took one more step, but the facilitator blocked his path, casually, phone in hand. "You might want to stay," she said gently. "Before parole has to come looking for you in uglier places." Vincent hesitated, cornered, not by fists, but by observation. Predators do not fear consequences. They fear witnesses. His voice, when it came, was thinner. "This isn't over." "It is," Mara said, "because I'm not the house you can haunt anymore." She sat still while he folded into himself like bad architecture. He left his coffee on the table untouched, like all his false generosity. The woman from outside approached slowly once he vanished. She wore no triumph, just exhaustion that had finally found a landing place. "You're the voice," Mara said. The woman nodded. "I go by Lena now." "Thank you," Mara said. Not as surrender, gratitude laced with spine. Lena's eyes softened. "You didn't follow his template. That's why you're still whole." Mara exhaled. "I don't feel whole." "You're not supposed to." "You're awake." They sat for a while. No script, no roles. Mara didn't need her story translated into pathology, just recognized into existence. Witness was medicine. The healthy kind. Before leaving, Lena gave her a final message. He repeats patterns until someone locks the door behind him. Now the system sees him. He won't recover anonymity. When Mara returned home, she placed the snow globe in a box with the Polaroids, not shrine, not wound evidence sealed, not circling anymore. She wrote her last note in the notebook. Not my mother's ending. Not his story anymore. Mine. That night she slept without the closet light. And for the first time in years, the darkness did not feel like an intruder. It felt like a room she now owned. Because silence was no longer a trap. It was just a night. And morning was coming. If this story gripped you, subscribe for more dark psychology storytelling. Comment your thoughts. Share with someone who loves psychological suspense. And stay tuned for the next story, because the most dangerous patterns are the ones we don't see coming.